So let's get started here talking about mobile. Thanks everybody for coming for this first ever mobile thinkLA event. And I'm proud to be keynoting it, so thanks for being here today. So before I get started about industry stuff, I just want to say a little bit about ChaCha and let you know what it is. How many of you have used ChaCha? Show of hands. Good. How many on SMS? How many on iPhone? All right, if you have an iPhone, download it now. In a month, you can download the Droid app for. We've got 25 million monthly uniques that come to ChaCha online or via mobile, and we're providing about 3 million answers a day. So far, we've answered a little over 1.2 billion questions. And we do it a little differently than other answer services because we have, anybody in here a guide or ever been a guide? All right, well, we have 65,000 of them around the country. 2/3 of them are in college, in their dorm rooms, and they're helping to mediate an answer in real time. So we stand on the top of the best of technology and find the best. It's like calling a smart friend. So when you text into ChaCha, we're funneling your question to a smart friend who can mediate that information off of the web or from their own knowledge banks. And on the iPhone, you can access ChaCha 3 different ways. So via the mobile web on the left here, standard web page, which we'll be improving on that over time. The mobile app we're very proud of. Try downloading that. You can see questions nearby. So in your neighborhood or even in this room, you'd be able to voyeuristically look at what everybody else is asking and drill down on that and then ask your own questions. And on the far right is SMS. And for those, there's kind of a myth out there that SMS somehow goes away with smartphones, and it's just not true. SMS is actually up on smartphones. People use it more, perhaps because of the keyboard and the great visual interface. In our case, we don't just do standard SMS, we do MMS. So, for example, if somebody asks the final score of the NBA championship, we work on the question, but while you're waiting, we send back a message, a word from our sponsor. And in this case, here's a Biggest Loser ad. And if somebody clicks on that on any kind of phone, smartphone or feature phone, so virtually all phones can support SMS and MMS, we will show a video. And that's not easy to do. And I'll show some of the stats on smartphones. They're coming on strong, but it still represents less than half the market. So if you want to get to the entire market with a movie trailer, this is a good way to do it. Here are some of the brands that we've worked with, many of them with repeat buys, and the list is obviously much longer, but we're working with some of the very top brands in the world. So let's talk about the industry. So the newest element in the advertising world is mobile phones, and does it matter? Do you have to go there, and do you have to do it now? So an interesting factoid is that there are 280 million mobile subscribers in the US alone, compared to, say, TV households, which is 125 million, and internet access, which is 221. So here's this new technology that allows you to have access to a much broader audience than was available in these other mediums. And the prediction, this one from Morgan Stanley, although there's several that are predicting about the same time frame, that usage of the mobile web is moving from the desktop to the mobile phone quickly, especially with smartphone proliferation. And within 3 years, we should see a crossover so that more users will be on the web via their mobile phones, which, by the way, is within our reach, usually 24/7, right? It's on your nightstand even when you're sleeping. You take it into the bathroom with you. It's 24/7. It's always on. Within 3 years, the web will be reached by more people and more often on the mobile phone than on the desktop. So that's a reason to speed up, accelerate getting involved in the mobile world if advertising to all of these users is important. So what are some of the differences when you think about mobile versus desktop? So with a desktop situation, when you're accessing the internet, it's usually a mostly solitary activity, usually in a fixed location, although less so with iPads and laptops. And typically the activities are, on the order of 30 minutes to 3 hours long that you're sitting there in front of your desktop. And when you're searching, you're sifting through results, right? Millions of results get returned in a split second, and you have to sort and sift through and research. And it's your job to get it done. If the search engines, Google or Bing or Yahoo, don't get it right, whose fault is it? Yours? Because you didn't research well enough, right? So, and it is focused on the desktop, and it is research-oriented, versus you have mobile, which is a much more social experience. You're often, while mobile phones are used in the home plenty, you're often with other people, whether that's family or friends. So it's a social device, and often you might share what you find. Typically, you can do things while you're on the go that you wouldn't do at your desktop. The activities tend to be more 30-second oriented, or minutes maybe, but seconds to minutes, not hours. And typically, people don't want to sit there and sort through results on their phone. They really want the answer. So you want an app that gets you an answer to a travel question or a restaurant finding question. You don't really want to sort and sift through things. You want the answer. And typically, mobile phones are used while you're doing other things. And I've got another slide on that coming up. So this was an interesting stat. Desktop users focus most of their activities on informational needs. So nearly 90% is informational. But when you look at mobile, it's more transactional, more navigational, and it's the reverse. 90% of it is more of that immediate need. 80% of people using mobile phones or who use the mobile web are frustrated due to how long it takes to get to things, the speed with which you can find information. It's too many clicks. You fat finger in the wrong thing, and it loads your iPhone screen or your Droid with what you didn't want, and then you have to back out of that. And there's a lot of irrelevant content. So content needs to be very focused, which is a harder job than just spewing lots of information. And so a typical search session on desktop is about 15 minutes versus on a mobile phone, that would be forever, an eternity. And so you expect your answer within about 3 minutes. Oh, and I did want to note the click-through rate there is substantially lower on mobile today, but I think, when you see the technologies, for example, the clip that just ran from Mojiva, with the engagement factor, you can get those click-through rates up. Smartphone users are multitasking. So this was what I referenced a couple of slides ago. So, 44% are listening to music or watching TV, using the internet, playing video games, reading the newspaper, reading a book, like I said, at dinner or going to the bathroom, whatever. People are using their phones while they do everything else, right? It's pervasive in our lives. At a recent Google conference, Peter Norvigs, who's the Google Director of Research, said, "I see search moving away from statelessness to something more resembling a conversation." So instead of just one-way communication, blasting information out, it's more of a conversation to figure out what your needs are. And that's what ChaCha has been all about, is trying to take this search experience, which does not translate very well into a mobile phone with a small screen, even the biggest of screens for phones. It doesn't translate very well. And so what we do is try to take a question, and took a silly one here, but you can ask more important factual questions too. I should have asked how many people here used it on a test. In the Pew Internet results, ChaCha was one of the few companies mentioned because students were pulling it out during tests in the classroom. But anyway, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? You ask your question and you get an answer. You don't get microprint with lots of results that you have to figure it out. Interestingly, when you look across the entire web, much of that traffic is starting to migrate to come from mobile phones. So sites have to be designed to handle mobile phone usage, and it's still down in the 5 to 10% range. Google's right about 10%. And ChaCha, because we're delivering an answer and more succinct and targeted, is up in the 15% range. This was a Google stat that came out last week, which is very interesting and correlates with what we see at ChaCha. So at ChaCha.com, we see that our online traffic goes down on Saturday and Sunday. And it's the inverse, very complementary with mobile, because our SMS and our mobile web goes up on Saturday and Sunday. And you see that generally across the web, maybe less so on some of the social things like Facebook, but generally on the web, this is what you see. And so mobile is very complementary. And if you were pitching a movie on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, obviously mobile is the way to do that, as opposed to online. Also, by time of day, there's a difference. So interestingly, on the desktop, the peak is right after lunch, and the peak for mobile is about 12 hours later, near midnight. On ComScore, what you see, the difference between feature phones and smartphones. And smartphones are not in maybe in all of our hands, but it's not in everyone's hands yet. And what you see is, in terms of usage level, like using a browser, nearly 20% are using a browser on a feature phone, but when you give somebody a smartphone, now it's easy, right? So they can, 80% of them are using a browser, 82%. And you see similar stats all the way down the line, using an app, seeing ads either on an app or the mobile web, or responding to an SMS ad, even something like that in a not very sophisticated. It's the most prolific app in the world, SMS, but it's not a very sophisticated app. But you see that the click-through on ads on smartphones is double. Well, so what about these smartphones? How fast are they coming? The blue line represents where we've been, and the dotted line represents where we're going. And interestingly, Nielsen had a dotted line that was on maybe even a faster slope in these previous quarters, sort of hoping that it would finally come. Well, I'm glad to say that we're finally starting to move up in an exponential curve, as opposed to more of a linear curve that we had seen in the previous years. Or maybe it was exponential and we were just so early in the adoption curve. But we're now at about 37%, so still less than half, but 37% of the US mobile subscribers have a smartphone now, which is, I think, an important turning point for the industry to begin really leveraging that. And the breakdown on that, which is a little bit surprising, in a year, droids have, in 6 months, droids have increased 150%, and more than doubled in a year. iPhones, Apple is still represented there, but Droid has now passed them up in terms of percentage of penetration in the smartphone market. And then you see Microsoft and RIM down there as well. But don't forget, if you want to get to the broader audience, your advertising strategy really needs to incorporate things like SMS and MMS that work on all phones. And that's 63% of the population. So there's a few myths out there about smartphones. So there's sort of an assumption that if somebody's walking around with an iPhone or a Droid, that they're truly operating in smartphone mode, and that's not necessarily true. Some of the early adopters of smartphones don't even have data plans still, which is sort of shocking. Those who have data plans, it's kind of interesting, 23% of them consume just tiny bits. So they're using text messaging, but they're really not doing much surfing around on the web. So when you see these smartphone stats, of about a third of the population, you're still not getting to all of them because they don't have a data plan. And the top 10% of the super users of data consume 90% of that data, doing video and all sorts of things. So you have to remember that even though the industry is showing all of these incredible growth stats on smartphones, you're really only getting some percentage of that in reality. By the way, Android and iPhone users are consuming 2 times more data than other phones. I thought this was an interesting thing to throw in. There's a lot of concentration on location-based services, LBS. And it's important, and ChaCha is spending a lot of time there and has had a lot of success both online and in mobile. But interestingly, out of the 82% of the population that uses cell phones, 71% is using SMS, which is great, of the entire population, and 35% of the population have apps, which they may or may not use, but they have them, and 24% use the apps, and then only 4% are actually using LBS. And I think that will change dramatically at some point when the carriers price it correctly at a level where publishers can really incorporate LBS into all of the products, which would mean SMS, MMS, and smartphones obviously have a mechanism to do that. But the carriers could make it a lot easier, and we may see that happen over the next couple of years. But right now, whenever you're hearing LBS, you should tune into, and what's the reach? In terms of apps, what you find is 26% use that. They download the app and use it once, right, and throw it away. Then there's some 50% that's somewhere between 1 and 10 uses, and it's only 25% that is that loyal repeat customer, and they've put it at the front of their homepage and on their phone, and are really using it. So having an app and having downloads, it really follows the 80-20 rule, where about 20% of those who are downloading. If you see download stats, be a little skeptical of that too, because it's really less than 20% that are actually using many of the apps. And in terms of smartphone users, as I said before, they tend to use things like SMS, which is the broadest application in the world, use it more. So they're more likely to text, and they're more likely to text more often at 891 SMSs per month. And when you get down into teens and young adults, it's up in the 3,500 to 4,000 texts a month. And on this slide, I don't know if the colors show up very well in the back there, but it's showing recent activity in each of these areas where you can market on mobile phones. So at the very top is mobile websites, which is coming on strong, but not as strong as apps, which is right under it with the green bar on the far right. That's really taken off strong here in the last year. Mobile messaging and SMS has been strong in the last couple of years and is a great place still to get your message out. And mobile display ads are doing well also in the last 2 years. And you can see, blue was more than 3 years ago. So all of this has happened here in the last 3 years. If you have a mobile advertising strategy, though, you should really be placing your investments and bets in a number of these categories, not just one. So that's probably the most important thing I'll say today, is spread it around to incorporate mobile web and apps and SMS, MMS to get the best response. And that was really the point here, is spread it around between social and LBS and SMS. And personalize the experience. So I loved what Mojiva was showing in terms of the engagement factor. That's critical in any of your mobile advertising activities. And then make sure that creative can be spread across the different types of mobile media. When we look at mobile as compared to online in all of these categories, unaided awareness, aided awareness, ad awareness, every one of them, mobile trumps online, which is pretty incredible. So it makes sense, though, because here's this device that's with you all the time, and the engagement factor is so much higher. We're seeing on some of our campaigns, we get double-digit response rates, and often we see 3 to 5% response rates compared to online, which might be 0.5% to 1%. So where are the ad dollars being spent compared to where people are spending their time? So this represents the approximate number of hours per week, and by the way, there's different sources that have slightly different data, and in some cases not slightly different, very different. But generally the trend is about the same. What you see is internet and TV lead in terms of where people spend their hours per week, and mobile's somewhere right behind internet and TV and ahead of radio and newspaper and magazines. Mobile, over the next few years, will move into the number one position, no doubt. But where's the spend? So there's some dispute over whether internet's top or whether TV's top. So different sources say different things. But look at mobile. Everybody agrees nobody's spending money on mobile, right? And there's the opportunity. That's the place where you can get the most attention and the most reach if you jump in there quickly. And given that mobile is going to be moving into number one position within 3 years, you better get your experimenting done now. The other thing is that I wanted to point out is the internet bars looked exactly like the mobile bars do here 10 years ago. In terms of mobile marketing, it's still really early. So you've got 290 million mobile subscribers, as I showed in that first slide, but have they ever engaged with a mobile ad? 160 million of them haven't yet. And for those who have, 49 million have engaged. Only 29 million of those have actually clicked through, and then only 12 million of the population have clicked through to a purchase. So we're still early, and it's a great time to be experimenting to see what you can do with it and see these response rates and the engagement levels that you can get with your audience. US mobile ad spend projections are that within a few years, in 2014, we'll see $2.5 billion being spent on mobile advertising. And the lower part of the graph here is segmented by messaging and search and video. That's it. I'll take some questions, though. Thank you.